On October 1st, 1982, Epcot Center opened its gates for the first time. It was something completely different from the familiar castle parks that Disney fans were used to, and Imagineers took full advantage of being able to create innovative and original attractions. But as the park changed and evolved, many of these original attractions were lost, but never forgotten. So today, we're taking a look at some of Epcot's most missed attractions. Now, you may know the end result of each of these attractions after their retirements, but we teamed up with Park Lore, so you can also dig deep to figure out how each of these ride transformations came to be. So take a look at the link in the description and learn more about the story of these rides. World of Motion.
The World of Motion is enclosed in stainless steel and tells the story of transportation, past, present, and future.
World of Motion was an opening day attraction at Epcot in Walt Disney World and was the former tenant of the Transportation Pavilion. The attraction focused on the importance of transportation through different periods of humanity. It began during the Stone Age, where we could see the first method of transportation, foot power, followed by water transportation, traveling on animals, and the invention of the wheel, where we could see all the many useful ways of using the wheel. Next came the Ship Age, followed by the Flight Age, where we could find Leonardo da Vinci and a man flying in a hot air balloon. We also saw the evolution of steam vehicles, from the Mississippi riverboat to the steam locomotive. In the next scene, we could find the first traffic jam in the world, followed by many scenes from the 1940s and 1950s until we got to the speed tunnels. These tunnels took us to the center core of the fantastic City of the Future. After the Omnimover ride ended, we got out of the vehicles and into the Trans Center, which was full of exhibits and showed about transportations and the things surrounding it, and took an Intervention-style feel to all of it. Finally, we could find the ever-popular show, The Bird and the Robot. This was a fantastic attraction that contained more animatronics than any attraction ever made by Disney, with over 150 animatronic figures in 22 scenes. Not even Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion have this many animatronics. But sadly, GM, the sponsor of this attraction, was in a bit of a slump, and World of Motion had lost some popularity. So they requested that Disney create a new attraction in its place. And wanting to promote their cars, they asked that the new attraction would focus only on vehicles. To know more about this and the ride that replaced World of Motion, check out the link in the description. On January 12, 1996, World of Motion closed its doors forever to make way for a whole new attraction focused entirely on cars. As for the animatronics in the ride, some of them were reused for attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean and Goofy's Barnstormer. Other props like the Sea Serpent were at California Adventure in the back corner of Hollywood Pictures backlot near the restrooms for the Hyperion Theater for a while back in the early 2000s. Cranium Command. The Wonders of Life Pavilion was opened on October 19, 1989. This pavilion was dedicated to life, health, and the human body. It featured 2 attractions: Body Wars, a motion simulator ride that took us on a mission to study the effects of the white blood cells on a splinter inside the left index finger of a volunteer, and Cranium Command. Cranium Command is one of the most missed Epcot attractions by people who were lucky to have experienced it. Personally, I'm a huge Cranium Command fan, and I will never be over it. This show was a humorous presentation of the importance of the human brain. Guests became Cranium Commandos and were sent into the human brain on a mission. Before the attraction began, there was a pre-show where the loud General Knowledge briefed his Cranium Commando troops on their mission: to pilot human brains and keep the people therein out of trouble. This is where the star of the show was introduced. Buzzy was a tiny little soldier that was given one of the most challenging missions of all: piloting a 12-year-old boy. After the pre-show, guests entered the theater, which was designed to represent the inside of a human head. The outside world was seen through a pair of screens designed to mimic the eyes. An animatronic Buzzy appeared on an articulated seat so that he could move around during the performance. Helping him pilot the 12-year-old named Bobby via appearances on other screens was the logical left brain, the wacky right brain, the hungry stomach, the panicky bladder, who's also referred to as elimination, the adrenal gland that was prone to overreacting, and the heart's right and left ventricles. In addition, the monotone hypothalamus, which regulated autonomic bodily function, was represented via audio animatronics as a robot. During the show, Buzzy took Bobby through a typical day, from the time he got up to dealing with bullies at school and asking out the girl he liked. At each point in the day, the various body organs talked to Buzzy, explained the problems they were facing, and in many cases, argued over how Buzzy should deal with the situation. In the end, Buzzy eventually learned how to effectively balance the needs of his body crew in order to combat potentially stressful situations. This was really a fantastic attraction. But sadly, in January 2007, the Wonders of Life Pavilion was closed for good, without any explanation, and the attractions were left intact and abandoned. The animatronics remained in the ride until December of 2018, when reports of the Buzzy animatronic being stolen were posted. As for what's coming next for this area, you need to go to the link in the description to find out. Universe of Energy. The Universe of Energy Pavilion was part of the Future World section of Epcot. This pavilion focused on the different forms of energy used throughout the years and how renewable energy was the next frontier. And Disney took this seriously because the Universe of Energy attraction was an innovation in and of itself. The roof of the pavilion was covered in 80,000 solar cells that helped power the ride vehicles. The ride vehicles were able to hold up to 97 guests at a time. With 6 vehicles running per show and 2 shows running at a time, the attraction had a massive capacity of almost 12,000 people. They also marked the first time Disney would use a trackless ride system in any attraction. The show would last around 45 minutes, and whenever the vehicles would sit in a stationary position during the show, they would be charging from underneath the floor. When guests first entered the Universe of Energy, they were welcomed into a standing theater where they would watch an 8-minute live-action presentation that traced the various forms of energy found in nature and how people had learned to harness them. Then they were taken into another theater. The entire seating area would rotate to face 3 large projection screens. A 4-minute hand-animated film about fossil fuels played at this theater. After this film ended, the seating area would rotate another 90 degrees to face a curtain, which would then rise to reveal a massive primeval diorama. The 6 seating sections broke off from each other and slowly made their way into the space. It was absolutely huge, and it would take the ride vehicles 7 minutes to traverse. 36 audio animatronic dinosaurs populated the diorama alongside a bubbling tar pit, an erupting volcano with flowing lava and a realistic smell, and 250 fabricated trees. After exiting the diorama, guests would watch a 12-minute live-action film detailing the current and future energy resources being used around the world, followed by a 2-minute computer-animated film depicting ways humanity had benefited from using various forms of energy. It ended with the song Universe of Energy, and after the 45-minute show was finally over, guests were sent back out into Future World to enjoy other nearby pavilions. Universe of Energy was undoubtedly a strange attraction that could only work in a place like Epcot. Asking guests to give up almost an hour of their time to a single attraction, especially one that involved a lot of sitting and a lot of films, was a major undertaking. That being said, it developed a following at best, or gave people an air-conditioned hideaway at worst. On January 21, 1996, Universe of Energy closed for a refurb. This would involve changing the show's tone to something a little more upbeat, adding Ellen DeGeneres and Bill Nye into the films as narrators, and refreshing the dinosaur animatronics to reflect a more modern understanding of their appearance. Let's take a look at what opened in its place. Ellen's Energy Adventure. In the summer of 1996, Universe of Energy's refurb was falling behind schedule. Updates to the diorama had been implemented, but the films weren't completed. That being said, Future World East had seen the closure of World of Motion earlier in the year, and Horizons was operating sporadically. The decision was made to temporarily reopen Universe of Energy to prevent Wonders of Life from being the only open pavilion on that side of Future World in the summer. A lot of the theater effects were noticeably missing. An Ellen DeGeneres animatronic had been installed in the primeval diorama, but had to be covered up with temporary rock work to prevent continuity issues. After summer ended, the pavilion went down again to install the new films and prepare for its real debut. On September 15, 1996, Ellen's Energy Crisis opened to park guests for the first time. Within 2 weeks, the name was changed to Ellen's Energy Adventure. In this version of the attraction, a plot was created to move the guests along. In the first film, Ellen fell asleep watching Jeopardy and dreamt she was on an energy-themed version of the game show. Pitted up against her college rival Judy Peterson and Albert Einstein, Ellen failed miserably at answering questions. In a moment of quick thinking, Ellen called upon her friend Bill Nye the Science Guy to give her a crash course on energy history so she could beat out the other contestants. The second film showed Bill taking Ellen back into prehistoric times to learn about fossil fuels. The curtain inside the theater would lift, sending guests into the familiar primeval diorama. The only significant change was the addition of an Ellen audio animatronic who fought off an Elasmosaurus with a tree branch. The following film had Bill explaining the current energy resources being used around the world, and the final film saw Ellen jumping into the second round of Jeopardy to unseat Judy Peterson as the new champion. In 2004, Universe of Energy lost its sponsor, ExxonMobil, who had been overseeing the pavilion since opening day. Despite that, the attraction remained open and even saw a refurb from 2008 to 2009. It included updating the computer systems that controlled the ride vehicles, upgraded speakers inside the building, and a repaint of the building's exterior. But this wasn't meant to last. In 2014, the audio animatronic of Ellen DeGeneres stopped working. It was removed and replaced with a group of small dinosaurs, and never made its way back into the attraction. Attendance steadily dropped as more exciting experiences made their way into Epcot, and in July 2017, it was announced that Universe of Energy would close and be replaced by a completely new attraction. Less than a month later, on August 13, 2017, Universe of Energy closed forever. During its final show, the ride vehicles ran out of battery in the middle of the primeval diorama. Guests had to be evacuated out of the building, but they were encouraged by cast members to wander around the diorama and take pictures before exiting. And again, if you want to know more about what replaced this attraction, click the link in the description. Maelstrom. The Norwegian Pavilion was the last to be opened at Epcot's World Showcase, and this pavilion needed a new ride. The first ride that was proposed was called Sea Venture, and it was supposed to be a journey through mystical lands where guests could see trolls. The ride would finish with a rainbow bridge to Valhalla, but in the end, Norwegian sponsors wanted something different, so the ride changed a bit and became Maelstrom. This ride opened on July 5th, 1988, and was a mix of flume and dark ride. It took guests through mythological scenes of Norwegian history. We first boarded the boats that took us to the lift hill. Here, a voice could be heard telling us that those who seek the spirit of Norway face peril and adventure, but more often find beauty and charm. At the top of the hill, we could see Odin hovering above. The ride took us through scenes that showed us seafarers and maritime villages depicting a mythological version of Norway's Viking days. This was all very beautiful, but then we entered a type of swamp, and the scary part of the ride began. Inside this swamp, guests would come face to face with two very upset trolls. One of these was a large three-headed troll that became angered by our intrusion and proclaimed that we had entered troll country. Also in this area, there was a huge Nokken waiting for us with its enormous eyes and blinking underwater. This scene was terrific, and it used lots of effects like lighting or scents to make guests feel like they were in a swamp. And the animatronics were fantastic. The trolls cast a spell in the boat and banished us from the swamp by moving our boat backward over the falls. The boat then floats past scenes of polar bears and live trees before stopping on the edge of a waterfall exposed to the pavilion's main thoroughfare. Then it started moving forward again and descended down a 28-foot drop into a model of the North Sea. And after passing extremely close to an oil rig, the boat made its final stop at the loading dock once again. This ride was great, but as with all the other rides on this list, it was announced that Maelstrom would close to be replaced by a new ride. The ride closed on October 5th, 2014, and its replacement opened almost 2 years after this date. Horizons.
Step into the future in Horizons. Step into the future today.
Horizons opened exactly 1 year after Epcot opened as a part of Phase 2 of the park and was located between World of Motion and the Universe of Energy. This attraction was the only one in Future World to showcase all of Epcot's Future World elements: communication, energy, transportation, anatomy, along with humankind's relationship to the sea and the land, and it took us into the future of what Earth might look like based on scientific advancements. Horizons has been considered a kind of sequel to the Carousel of Progress. The Carousel focused on the past, and Horizons took place almost entirely in the future. It had an optimistic view of our potential futures, but it also featured a whimsical looking back at tomorrow sequence that offered a glimpse at past visions and views of yesterday's future. During this section, guests explored scenes of Jules Verne's science fiction adventures and retro-futuristic vehicles, such as blimps and zeppelins, conceived in mind by French illustrator and novelist Albert Robida. In an Art Deco-themed sequence, guests could glimpse at a smug robot butler with a vacuum cleaner and feather duster in hand, and giggle at a multi-armed robotic chef making a mess of the kitchen. These robots have become beloved icons of Horizons, occasionally featured on park merchandise and even popping up in other Disney attractions. The ride then showed modern technologies and ideas that could be used to build the world of tomorrow. Afterward came the main part of the ride: visions of futuristic life in cities, deserts, undersea, and even in space. The only Disney attraction at the time with multiple endings, Horizons then allowed riders to select which path they wanted to take back to the future port. From the space station Brava Centauri, depicting space colonization, from the desert farm of Mesa Verde, depicting arid zone agriculture, or from the Sea Castle Research Base, depicting ocean colonization. The ride was fantastic and beloved, but all things come to an end. And on January 9th, 1999, Horizons closed due to a sinkhole beneath the building. The building stood unoccupied for well over a year as Disney decided between either relaunching the attraction or demolishing the building and creating a new attraction in its place. It was decided to build a new cutting-edge outer space-themed attraction, so Horizons building was slowly torn down in July 2000. The demolition of the building marked the first time in Disney history that an entire ride building had to be demolished in preparation for a new attraction. But of course, you want to know what happened to each of these attractions and what replaced them. So go right now to Park Lore, where Part 2 is up. They wrap up the tales of these closed classics by exploring what happened to them after their closures. Park Lore is the perfect place for Imagineering fans. You can explore the complete, in-depth stories of the best rides from around the globe. Visit parklore.com to dig in.